globe. If you look at the sixth facet of your role, it's about technology standards and network infrastructure. So when you look at that, you look at standards and policies, disaster recovery and business continuity, vendors and contracts. So when you look at standards and policies, it's the what's perceived as a traditional lift and shift of networking operations and cloud services, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, the operating systems. So what are the policies that are coming into effect in this whole new virtual world? So that became a big initiative. Disaster recovery and business continuity in terms of putting new norms in place, assess conformance to disaster recovery. There were audits that were being done to understand that there is business resiliency to tackle with this unforeseen pandemic that hit organizations. And the third aspect is also to set minimum requirements and boundaries for IT vendors and IT contracts, and doing audits, periodic audits, to make sure that they are compliant. That became a big part of the role of the CIO, CDO, and CTO. Again, let's look at an example of the humanization of business, building the emotional connect with the workforce, workplace, and marketplace. And no better example than to share what AT&T Business has been able to do and their response to the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of accelerating transformation. So while you would typically have a project management office or a program management office, what AT&T Business did was to really create a transformation office, which really looked at three aspects, three pillars, and they're actually built a huge playbook as to how they've been able to turn things around. But it's really about three things. One is about the agility in action, the employee mobilization. So it's all about, again, from a grassroots level, how do you reach an agreement with employees to really be a part of the change? And for the first time in its history, it was about reaching an agreement with even the union leadership on conditions for represented employees to work from home, an action that they have never done before. So really being able to carry the employees through all of the transformation that they had put in place. The second aspect that I'd like to highlight is about rapid response to customer needs. So they did put a crisis response team, which was a part of the delivery command center. And the three areas that they were focused on is to really look at AT&T core network, customer needs, and an incident command center. And the third pillar that they were looking at is transformation and action. And that was being done. All of the initiatives that were being run fell into four buckets, which is basically people, process, technology, and culture. And the results is there for everyone to see. In 2 months, they delivered 16,000 plus service requests with 80% improved cycle time. So again, a great example to share.